the last ever Fausty Witches Show on the Keep On Chatting network.
I'm gonna miss that intro.
Yeah. Why is it I always want to keep it the Keep On Chatting Paranormal Network? It never feels like it should be just the Keep On Chatting Network. It should be Keep On Chatting Paranormal Network. But I suppose, it won't be around for much longer from what I understand.
I
Um,
guess so.
so no need to change the name now. So obviously, last ever Fausty Witches Show with a Liam and a Chris. Oh, it feels like the end of an era, Chris. It really does.
It does.
So I suppose really what we should be doing is we should be being the worst and most faustiest we've ever been. So
What,
I
worse than
have
being a
my
normal?
little list
Okay.
of people that we need to insult, right?
Okay.
Because we have to get a little bit of everyone in now. We've got to get the psychics. We've got to get the witches. It's the witches. We've got to get the ceremonial magicians. We've got to get the
Okay.
paranormal investigators. We got to get a little bit of everyone in. Surely on the last episode, we can't let any
Okay.
stone be unturned.
Okay.
So obviously, this is a call in. What are we called? Fausty Witches Show. Witchcraft Diploma episode. So what should we
Yes.
start with? Should we start with the Center of Excellence?
Yeah, sure. We can talk about their dark goddess diploma.
Because there's one thing that I've noticed about the Center of Excellence is that you can just fucking go there to learn anything. Literally any piece of magic you want to learn, you can learn it from the Center of Excellence. And Chris, and you don't just learn it, you get a qualification in that said thing. So Chris, do you want to learn about chakras? You can do a
No, not
diploma
really.
in that. Do you want to be a Reiki master Reiki practitioner, not just a
No, not
general
really.
one? Well, you could if you wanted to by going on the Center of Excellence and getting a diploma in it. Do you want to be a gifted psychic? You can get
Oh,
that. There is a diploma in that. Do you want to learn a Wicca? Do you want to learn a
really?
witchcraft? All of
No,
these
really not.
things you can get qualified very quickly from the Center of Excellence.
I
And,
wonder. I wonder how the witch.
and,
I wonder how. I wonder how the psychics feel about that. That they can get the title on a certificate, because I'm not sure they'd feel very nice about that.
unlike doctor, psychic is not a protected word, Chris. Anyone can use the term, like
Right.
herbalist,
Right. I'm talking about the word gifted, not the word
gifted.
psychic.
Hmm. Gifted. Now, back in my days of primary school, we had the patchwork quilt room. Okay.
Oh,
And
God.
that was a room for
This is where you say something
non-gifted
highly
people.
inappropriate again.
It was a room for non-gifted people. I find myself in there quite a lot. Nowadays they call it remedial class, but it was the
Yeah.
patchwork quilt room when I was there. Um, and there was such a thing as gifted, and the gifted, they were the table, the blue group, right? So
Okay.
every single table, you were split up in the class into tables, and every in the middle of each table there'd be a tray. It'd be a plastic tray that you'd put your work in and all of that, and each table would have its own color, which would slide in a little drawer system. I was in the red group, and the red group was really the remedial group. In fact, the red group, it was like one of those Western films, where you've got like the bell that just blows past and there's no one about, because a lot of the people from the red table, minus one or two, used to get taken out of the room and taken to the patchwork quilt room. Now, the blue group, the
Okay.
blue one, that was the gifted group. That was like they didn't really give you A's or A stars or anything, but that was like creme de la creme. They get everything right. They
Starts
know
every
what
day.
adjectives, nouns, and verbs are, right?
Okay. I was on that table.
You would have been on that table, yes.
Yeah.
So I don't know where I'm really going with this because I did have an originally something that I was going to say, but I can't remember what it is. But given that you are on the blue table type group, the gifted group, gifted psychics and all of that, you care a lot about these things called CPD, is it? Continued professional
Continue professional
development.
development.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Now, as for your job, Chris, shaping young minds and all of that, you must
Mhm.
surely have to do some sort of CPD, get points or some shit like that. As do many doctors and the like, important people with big, very academic type careers. They need the CPD points every year, presumably, yeah?
Kind of.
Kind
It's
of?
yeah. So you wouldn't only in the real world, where you can't go and get a diploma on the internet, in order to get CPD points. That's where you get CPD points. So in a real job, you wouldn't do that. In a real
Right.
job, you'd have what's called a CPD portfolio, which is
Ah.
where you would point out the things that you've done to improve your professional development each year. But
But
CPD
Chris,
points are what people use in when they go and have these internet courses in order
yeah.
to try and convince people that they know what they're doing.
You used to work in a private doctor surgery, didn't you?
Uh
Yeah.
huh.
So if you were interviewing, say, a new doctor that wanted to join the practice, and you said to them, "What continued professional development have you done?" And they say, "Ah, wait just there. I've brought my folder. Okay, I brought my folder here. Yeah." And they open their folder and they show you page after page, right, of Center of Excellence diplomas, okay, with CPD points on that.
Yeah.
One might be for a Reiki practitioner, one might be learn anatomy, one might be, I don't know,
Gardener for
Wicca,
beginner.
all that sort of shite. Um, are you saying that that doesn't mean anything? That you can't take your witchcraft diploma, your Wicca diploma, your robe, your I don't know, whatever things they do, your Reiki practitioner massage
No,
diploma, and that
no,
is not classed as continued professional development.
no.
But how can the Center of Excellence can say that this is CPD points? How does that work?
Liam, I'm not even sure if you went to the Chinese nail salon in well, I went to say Quinton, but you wouldn't know where that was. Even they wouldn't accept your CPD points.
Wait. Do you mean to tell me that when I paid £129, and I didn't pay 129, I paid 29.99 because it got reduced from £129 down to 29.99, and I thought this is a one-time offer that's come up on Facebook. I've got to jump on this because this offer ain't going to be around for long. I know that, Chris, because it told me at the bottom that this offer ain't going to be around for long. That
It's
when
still
I
available, Liam.
wanted
3 years later.
to work at the Thai nail salon, I
Yeah,
thought, right, I kind of think if you can piss, you can paint. Therefore, painting nails is probably a lot more easier than painting a ceiling. And I've painted ceilings, so I can probably paint nails, right?
I
And
don't think you can
I
paint
had a
nails, Liam.
CGCSE in art, okay? And we had to learn about Modigliani and Picasso and shit, right? So I'm way overqualified for that. But I thought I haven't done anything recently. And I thought, what is it these sorts of people would like? I know. I'll do a diploma in Chinese traditional medicine because that makes
Okay.
sense. So are you telling me that the CPD points I've got and all of the knowledge from the Chinese traditional medicine diploma that I enrolled in, that I got at a really good deal, Chris, doesn't mean anything.
No.
Really?
No.
Is this just a con? How is this?
No,
How is this allowed?
it's
Because
designed.
I was advertised this as continued professional fucking development.
It's designed to keep retired people busy.
Right.
And an attempt to give people that want to do alternate careers some paperwork that they can say, I've actually tried to do some work here.
So TCM diploma now for working in the nail salon. Right.
Yes.
Now there's the curry house up the road. There's advertising for jobs, right? I've cooked a curry before, and I've also warmed them up from ready meals, so I know the difference between homemade and the crap that Mr. Tesco sells, right? But again, I don't have a portfolio of food, right? And I don't have my food hygiene certificate because it got taken away from me for being unhygienic. but Chris, I do have a diploma in Ayurvedic medicine.
Okay.
So that's from around about the same kind of part of the world, and both of them use turmeric. So is that not okay? Does that diploma, would that get me points for my interview at the curry house?
No.
Have I wasted 60 quid on 2 diplomas? They ain't gonna get me nowhere in life.
Yeah.
Well, I'm glad I didn't enroll on those 2 courses when they were at $129.99 because I'd be even more upset than I am now.
Just to break your heart a little bit more, is those of offers are always on. 3 years later,
What?
you could still go on, and they'll still be $29.99.
But surely not. I mean, I'd expect that from a discount sofa seller like DFS, where they've always got a sale on, but it's only ever the full price in one shop that is in the middle of nowhere. I wouldn't expect that from a proper institution of learning like the Centre of Excellence. I mean, it's a centre of learning, of excellent learning. I mean, Chris, have you got anything to back that up, or is this just being slanderous now?
I just really needed to hurt you. I'm sorry, but it's
So
the
you're
truth.
saying I've been conned?
I'm telling you that's not worth the paper it's written on.
Right. Okay. But why is it not worth the paper it's written on? Is it because it's not a formal qualification from a university or a college or something?
Yeah.
But there is accredited course. Is it an accredited course? It says that. When I put my details in, it said this is an accredited course.
Accredited means that it's got the person that's selling it has got a license to do adult courses. That's all accreditation means.
Do you need a license to sell courses?
As in, it's a way of kind of standardizing. It says that somebody has checked that they, ask for tests.
It is a
and shit.
course that you're not just going to get a PDF document.
Yeah. That's all accredited means.
So accredited means
the one you wanted, I can't think what the other word is. There's another word that they use that means endorsed. An endorsed course means that some actual education centre that isn't on the internet has put their name next to it saying we endorse that this is real.
Right. So proper institutions are gonna think that it's crap if I wave my diploma around. Yeah.
Yeah.
What about unprofessional institutions? Will they care? Because I've noticed, right, that there's this thing, this group, right, called Wicca, right? And I could do a diploma in Wicca. I could do a diploma in Wicca and print it off, or I could pay a small amount of money for them to send a slightly nicer version on fancy paper. If I did the Wiccan diploma, could I then go to, I don't know, a Wiccan organization? Could I go to Maxine Sanders' house and force her to let me in? Because I've got a piece of paper that's a Wiccan diploma, and we're basically family at that point.
No.
But surely it must come from somewhere, because as we all know, Wicca is a lineage tradition, so it needs to be initiation upon initiation upon initiation. Do you mean that the Centre of Excellence diploma that I bought and wrote that fucking essay at the end for, not to mention all of the multiple choice questions I had to answer about Uncle Gerald, are you trying to say they don't mean nothing, that I'm not part of that Wiccan family that I do so ever so much love?
Yes.
Right. Okay, so
Sorry.
so why is that then? So we've obviously
Well,
got the
one,
Wiccan
because
thing.
you can't be a Wiccan unless you've, you know, what is it? A year and a day
Well, I don't know. I thought someone had to have sex with you, like have
of
sex with your
chasing
grandma,
people,
or maybe that's just the
down.
Alexandrian tradition.
Possibly.
Right.
We've got some comments.
So are
People are
you
interacting
suggesting
here.
that I move from the Wicca diploma that's not going to get me anywhere in life and maybe do the traditional witchcraft diploma that is also on there? Because I think I'm a little bit of a traditional kind of man, you know? I think I could do things traditionally. Yeah?
Okay. Right. For those that aren't Liam, obviously it's our last session. So, and then this is gone forever. So obviously ask all the questions you like. We will rip the
Ideally,
piss
make
out
it
of
personal. Pry into Chris's
diplomas.
personal life.
I'm not guarantee that I'm going to answer those. So, but yes, today is about learning over the internet. So some of you can probably pipe up about the fact that we've been your mentors for the last year or so, way before.
Year and a day? Is there anyone that's
Year and a
literally
day.
a year and a day mentorship?
I don't know. Some are older than some of the old, definitely older than that.
Is
But
the
I don't
year
know
and a
if we've
day
got
thing like their birthday? Should we have contacted them and like said well
maybe.
done or something? I don't know. I
Maybe.
don't keep track of people's actual birthdays, let alone the fucking year and a day that I've known them for.
No.
Year and a day since you gave us all your credit card details.
No.
It's that time already. Time for your annual renewal. Oh, Katie Veronica says 18 months. 18 months. Is it really been 18 months, Katie
Can't be
Veronica?
that long. It must. It can't be.
No.
Shit. Yeah, yeah.
Wow.
It must be because thingy's been going on longer than that. COVID's been going on longer than that.
I love how some people actually think that everything we say is pretty much accurate and true. Alex, yes, in the traditions within Wicca, there is the book traditions, which you buy a shit book, and then there's the initiatory traditions, where you must be initiated by a member of the initiatory tradition that can trace their lineage back to Gerald Gardner or Alexander's.
Yeah.
Or technically, if you can trace your lineage back to Alexander's, you could trace your lineage back further. Anyway, so yes, within that system, within that religion, I should say, there is initiations and they care a lot about that shit. I can't wait to see diplomas for traditional witchcraft. That seems to be the news buzzword these days. Michelle, you are absolutely right there. Traditional witchcraft is the latest buzzword. If you put traditional witchcraft in anything, you're bound to get views. Pay us 300 and we'll tell you how you can do what you want. Oh, okay. $300? £300? Are they wanting you to... Michelle, are you wanting them to pay via PayPal? I knew someone
I think
that
she wants
used
300 pints of blood, to be honest.
I don't know.
So
I
you'll
don't
have to
know.
get her friends and neighbours involved.
Pay us 300 and we'll tell you how you can do what you want. I know someone that used to work on a premium rate phone line, and they very often would be paid to tell the person what they wanted to hear.
Michelle says she prefers Venmo.
Chris has been my mentor for almost a year. Leaps and bounds I've made in a very short time. I didn't
Caused all
know that
sorts
you
of
made him
trouble.
run track and do hurdles, Chris.
No. But his Fitbit thinks he has.
I could use the blood. Venmo. I don't know what's going on now. Have we
Well, I
got
did
any
answer you, Ian, but you
genuine
don't listen to
questions
me,
that
see?
I've gone over? Right. Maybe the witchcraft moot can act as the accreditors now. What do you think? I think that with the amount of magical pagany moots that are out there, I think that if they were to start accrediting things, it would probably be in a worse state than what the Centre of Excellence does. And I do not speak for all moots, neither do I speak for the moots I attend. However, from what I've seen, the ratio currently is 1 in 20 moots seem to be somewhat mildly acceptable at the very least. You always want to check who's doing the accreditation. For an example, some colleges say they're accredited, but the organization that did the accreditation is not the industry standard, and no one will accept that diploma. Isn't that like when we were going to make that association so that we couldn't be thrown out of the association and accredit ourselves? Yeah. Okay, I see how that works. So, witchcraft diplomas. Do you think, Chris, you can learn witchcraft from a diploma on the internet?
If we did one, yeah.
So the only way you could ever learn witchcraft from an internet diploma is if you were to make one. Is that what you're saying, Chris?
Yeah, because the bits I've sampled from others, unless somebody can find a really good one and send me some PDFs of what they look like, and I'll be like, okay, I don't think that would be. But so we can actually figure out, I haven't come across any. At the very best, they'll condense down what a good book from Cunningham would have written
Is there a
into a
good book
course.
from Cunningham? I didn't realize that.
I quite like the Magical Herbs one.
Do
The
you?
Magical Herbs Encyclopedia.
Okay.
I'd probably cross out 2/3 of the book, but there's got to be something useful in it. I like its layout.
You like the contents page. After that, it went all a bit downhill.
Yeah. And as we've been scolded again about Keldon's book, maybe Keldon's book is a good one for teaching traditional witchcraft.
Well, I was under the impression that someone stumbled across a certain review of the Keldon book, and they decided, because the review said the Keldon book, which is shit, that they would not go and buy the Keldon book. And then eventually caved in, and many months down the line actually bought the Keldon book and found the Keldon book really, truly and utterly changed their magical practice for the better. And then came back to say that it well and truly had changed their magical practice for the better, and that they should not have listened to a negative book review, to which there's many a problems there. Least of all, that if someone's doing a book review and they say the book is good, that does not mean the book is good. If someone says the book is bad, that does not mean you're going to think it's bad. It's just the opinion of the person that's doing the review. I mean, there are many award-winning films that are absolute garbage. I went and saw the musical Cats. Oh my God. It was the biggest load of shit I think I've ever seen. Seriously, it was bad. But the review said it was good. Do I leave comments saying that the reviewers are wrong? Well, I suspect that they have other agendas. But no, I don't waste my time. I don't waste my time doing that. Alex says, ideally, I think that everyone should learn from a mentor such as Chris and Liam in person and should join the Off Witchcraft Patreon. Well, thank you, Alex. I think that's a very nice thing to say. I'm paraphrasing. He actually wrote a lot more than that, but there we go. I'll put that up for everyone to watch. Michelle says, I saw someone in a group saying they read Scott Cunningham because they were old school. Does that mean Scott Cunningham's old school, or does that mean that they were the people were old school? Because unfortunately, Cunningham is old school. It's the 90s. It's the last century, I think, really, isn't it, Chris? I mean, I know he's still writing, even though he's been dead for quite a while now. But, you know.
You've gone quiet, Liam.
We've got a genuine question. So everyone behave themselves. And Chris is going to give a genuine answer that you won't find in a Scott Cunningham book. So,
see, I knew you'd make me do the hoodoo one.
Have you ever made a sour jar? How does one protect oneself from kickback? Now, William's already jumped in and said, bitch, you better mask up before you craft up. But I'm wondering whether, William, they know what that means. So, Chris, I wonder whether you could answer the question as to whether you've ever made a sour jar, because I want to do this before little Delphi chimes in, because she's the
Before
queen
she
of
realises a hoodoo question.
Yeah, a hoodoo question, and then scores us with hoodoo, saying that we're not taking the practice seriously, which of course we do find the practice very serious. How does one protect oneself from kickback from doing a sour jar?
Okay.
Mr.
So it
Chris.
depends on what you're calling kickback. LD has noticed. Okay. It depends on what you're calling kickback and how you understand how a sour jar is made. So when you're creating a sour jar, or a honey jar or anything like that, you're creating a link with the person that you're using. So it's a case of whether or not you understand how that link is established and how to protect yourself from anything coming back up the link. So the problem with a lot of hoodoo practice is they provide permanent links to the person that you are working on. And what people don't realize is that how those things work. So you need to make sure that anything that's coming back up that link is negated by your own practice. So that'll be regular cleanses and all that shit, or also making sure that that the link is not done in the most traditional sense. So the main way that hoodoo practitioners will attach said link will be with kind of biologicals or something like that in order to convey or a photograph of etc. If you were to go in energetically only and establish that link in a way that they wouldn't know it was there, depending on who you're attaching your sour jar to, they're mundane, then they're probably not going to notice. The main reason people get kickback on a mundane is because they've left that connection going for too long and things start to creep back up. So as soon as you start to get the effect you want to wrap up that spell fairly soon and dispose of it, cut the link and walk away. What people tend to do is leave them running for too long and then the negative starts to seep back up the link. But yes, if you're an established practitioner, I would hope that you'd be working on an energetic level, and therefore the link is easier for you to manage, and you would know what was coming back up that link. So yes, I know sour jars, honey jars, lots of hoodoo practice that is not fully explained because they're not hoodoo's practitioners that are actually pushing them. Because most hoodoo practitioners wouldn't share their practice with you publicly or otherwise, means that you don't fully understand how they work. The idea is that you go to them and you pay for theirs.
Okay. Alex also asks a question, does that apply to sweetening jars too? Now, Alex, just think about what Chris has just said about how it works, and then apply that to how the sweetening jar works, and then you tell us the answer. And then based on your answer, we will elaborate or go into more detail if we need to go into more detail. Because I think you gave quite an interesting explanation, Chris, and you know it isn't. I know it's not what people are used to hearing, because they're used to hearing dribbly shit like, "Oh, do a little protection spell, do a little bit of that," which obviously doesn't really work at the end of the day. If you're talking about creating that link and working through that link, that is a two-way connection. You think that is a one-way connection, much like a little child comes along and gets a little lasso and lassos someone in order to control them, like a leash around the neck. What they didn't quite understand is that that child's a child and they lassoed an adult, and that adult's going to come along and just yank the child and use the child and walk the dog, which basically is meaning that that one-way connection you think is a one-way connection is never a one-way connection, is a two-way connection. And if they sense that you're working magic on them through that connection, they will utilize that connection to screw you up, basically.
Yeah.
Now,
so
the problem is the magic involved with that, because if you're relying on a magical protection spell to stop that, that's kind of like putting up a Lego wall. Sure, a Lego wall might stop. Well, it's probably not even going to stop a toddler. Let's be fair, Chris. A Lego wall, it's not really going to stop shit. Really, you're talking about power at that point. You're talking about you utilizing power through that and them utilizing power through that. And it's almost like how a tug of war works. With a tug of war, the strongest practitioner doesn't necessarily always win, but a strong practitioner or a stronger person with the appropriate technique will win. So Alex says, I think the answer is yes, which basically, yeah. So they are both designed to work in the same way, but they're both doing different things. So sweetening jar is probably used to sweeten, is more of a nicer thing. Sour jar is souring, so negative kind of thing, but they still work the same. So that the methodology behind how the spell works is what you need to think about primarily if you're going to try to work through other people's defensive, or more importantly, to see what went wrong with your spell, because understanding how the spell works is essential for getting the spell to work every time, and it's essential for diagnosing and fixing problems. If you don't know how the spell works, and I don't mean labeling shit like, oh, it's sympathetic magic. If you don't actually know what that means beyond the dictionary definition, then obviously you need to break it down further and only use the spell work that you actually do understand. Anything to add, Chris?
Yeah, so I was just going to add to kind of re-establish for Melissa what Will was saying. So with the mask up part is one way of working is that you essentially develop persona. I don't mean split personality, but that you create a protective mask that should something recoil back up, because you've underestimated how powerful somebody is, or that not even necessarily that, just because someone's mundane doesn't mean that there aren't any protections in place by people that they know that practice. So, it would be tricky for you to come at my family, that sort of thing. Do you know what I mean? Even though, because I live with my brother, if you were to go for my brother, you're not going to have that. That's not going to work for you, even though he's fairly mundane. That's not going to work on you, because it wouldn't work, because you'd be then competing with me. You wouldn't be competing with a mundane. You'd be back at competing with me, but you wouldn't necessarily know that if you'd never met me or knew I practiced.
Or
so this is where it's tricky.
That sensitivity to read the situation.
Yeah, you need to know who's around, who's keeping that particular person safe. And not even necessarily, here's one to blow your mind because it's the last one, why not make it slightly more no holdsy? Is it may not even be that mundane's actual knowledge or family member that's protecting them. So if they may have been a witch in a previous life and not aware that they've carried on some of their protections across into their next lifetime. So that might be a level of protection that's actually already built into their aura space or built into one of their energetic bodies that you can't break through, because it's not actually doesn't actually have a foundation in this lifetime. So that magic actually comes from somewhere else. So unless you're able to see not only beyond the energetic point of view, but if you're one of the no holders, actually see where the next branch they're connected to, actually, as opposed to the branch they're currently on. Those sorts of things get tricky. But I just thought I'd throw that back because I know a lot of Witchcraft livers like to be on here and they listen to the podcast. So
putting it super simply is like a VPN. So the basic mask system is, if you did your link, your shower gel, or you maybe used a link as a puppet or something like that, worked through that puppet to get to the target person in there, right? So say I want to take the magic and work through him and get to him over there. What's going to happen is that I'm going to work the magic on him. If he's adept enough and can understand and can sense it, he might then send that magic back, which is going to come back and affect me. The mask system in its most simplest form is you putting a stopgap in between. So if you're wearing a mask, you're creating a persona, and then you can do that in a basic way or you can do that in an advanced way. But the signature that Chris picks up on isn't going to be yours, it's going to be the mask. So whatever he sends back is going to hit the mask. Okay? And
so
someone's put an interesting...
For those not actually all that familiar with VPNs, the non-internet age ones, it acts as a kind of circuit breaker. So it has the potential that it delays a damage from hitting you, but you would be aware of it. So it's like
stone hitting the window when you drive the car.
Yeah, when you're driving past and you're kind of like, oh shit, I should deal with that. It's not something that if they were to then keep repeating that work back up, that mask is only going to hold up for some of that attack if it was someone smart enough to come back up that link. So yeah, it's like when we've talked about it on previous ones, haven't we, about puppet work. People forget that puppets and pretty much all spell work that you're doing works on this principle of creating a connection. So to send something to a person that is specific, you've got to establish some kind of connection. So it's being aware of how that works, seeing and sensing it first and foremost. Sorry, Liam, you were going to...
Julie makes an interesting point. It seems like any time you establish a link, you should cut it when you get the results you want, because no matter the type of spell, things can come back with that link. I think that's quite a good kind of rule of thumb. Do you have to? Not necessarily, but a lot of this sort of thing, it really hinges on how competent the magical practitioner is. If you're a competent magical practitioner that can really sense all of this stuff and manipulate the energy and see which direction it's coming from and define what type of connection it is, what type of energy it is, and deal with it, you can leave the link going, of course, because you're in control of the situation. If it's a complete beginner, it might be a good rule of thumb to say, look, you're not going to be able to sense whether something's coming back or not. So there's a couple of simple little steps that you might be able to take, one of which could be, well, when the thing is done, break that connection. So yeah, there are a couple of things. Obviously, we try to encourage people to push their practice further. And I know the problem with the Fausty Witches group was, although that it was basically Fausty Witches Show designed for beginners, there are a number of intermediate and beyond practitioners in there. So it's trying to create content and explain things in a way that keeps everyone happy, which isn't always easy. Speaking of which, she needs to throw out the water from the storm spell last night. Ooh, storm magic.
So I don't think we covered magical disposal on this show, but I know we did in the Witchcraft Live, didn't we?
And on
We did
YouTube,
a really good video quite early on the YouTube. There are videos about magical ingredient disposal. It's something that is never covered in the beginners books ever, and I never understand quite why. I don't know if it's because people don't think they will get that far, or the practitioner writing it isn't particularly good. But as Liam had the Foxy pop it up, and obviously we've got Bonfire Night coming up soon and Samhain, Foxy was specifically designed for the Samhain box. There was a trial at seeing whether or not people were interested in us doing things like that, to give you a kind of alternate way of celebrating these kind of Wheel of the Year things. But the reason that Faust, the reason he's called Foxy is because he's a guy doll. That's what he's based on.
Guy Fawkes.
So you stuff him with leftover spells, bad wishes, kind of anything that kind of magical waste, and then you burn him. So the same way you would Guy Fawkes. So you stuff him with all the things you want to get rid of, and you set fire to him. So you can use Foxy for all sorts of things, but that's what he was designed for. He was designed for actually magical disposal.
Most people use them for killing their parents.
Yes. Yes.
Or is that just this week?
That's just other nefarious things.
I do think Foxy's probably been used more for evil things, to be honest. There's been some healings traditional and stuff cleansing. Like that, but yeah, that's cleansing of a different sort. I kept mine in my room running a year. I was surprised when I got a call from the person I was doing it on. When I realized what had been done or what had happened, I promptly destroyed it shortly after. Yes, there's a lot of problems with magic in that obviously you will only be able to protect yourself against things that you at the current level that you're practicing at. So there are so many magical potential problems, pitfalls and dangers out there that you're not going to be aware of because you haven't got to that level that you can begin to understand them. Like the more you know about the universe and the like, the more you realize that actually all of the oxygen potentially could go from this side of the room to that side of the room in a second and leave me dying. Or a solar flare might knock out all of this side of the world and destroy the world. The more you know, the more you potential magical things are at your disposal, but then the more potential magical pitfalls that you're aware of and potential ways that can be worked on you yourself.
Staying in that vein, Melissa, just because you have mentioned a sour jar, which is what Alex is what Alex is mentioning. What the other part people forget is because, particularly when they keep something like that for long, particularly with sweetening spells in the kind of hoodoo vein, people tend to use things that are sugar based and include things like honey. And when what they don't seem to realize is if you're going to keep something for a long time, it has the potential to rot when it is a food stuff. So if you were to make a sweetening jar that you're planning to keep for a while, you are working on a type of sympathetic magic there. So the reason is that you then get the negative kickbacks for something like that is because the honey turns sour or goes off, starts to get moldy. So if you're going to keep something for a long time, stick to the dry stuffs. There are less chance of dry sugars or salts or anything like that to go off or go bad in a natural way. And therefore, if it goes off in a natural way, that's going to have a kickback. So there are many honey jar spells. I went through a bit of a phase last year, or was it year before, where we had loads of people asking about kind of honey jars. They were the kind of in thing at the time, and lots of people were having this kind of kickback. And the reason they're having this kickback is because they were keeping them for too long. The things that were in them were going off, and then they're wondering why that was then starting to turn sour. So yeah, when you're considering your spell ingredients, how is that going to last? The same thing people do with fucking altar, what do you call them? Worshipy shit. What do you call them? Offerings
and stuff.
People don't think about the actual natural environment of what's going on. But yeah, there are some really great kind of easy tell signs that something's going funny. Can you pop that? I know we've gone out of order, but can you pop that last one Katie Veronica's just said up? Because that's a helpful one.
With honey jars, they go solid if left a long time, and I take them in a hot cleansing bath with me. So Katie Veronica likes to take a bath with her jars.
So though it's because the heat will then soften them up, but in a slow way. So if you were to you would burn the honey if you cooked it too quickly, but in that kind of warm bath,
I'm just imagining Katie Veronica in a bubble bath surrounded by jars, stroking them, going, "Yes, my pretty."
So, but yeah, and the same happens with sour jars, particularly when they put, I know people who put dirt and excrement and things like that in them, and then are surprised when they go too bad. At the end of the day, it's a live link when you create these spells. So, the more you do to it, the better, So, just to add to that, honey is antimicrobial, but it still will go off eventually. It only gives a limited amount of resistance.
And you've got to think about what you're putting in with it, which can make it go rancid as well. I've seen honey jars go really nasty, really rancid and horrible. All of these things are very good to know when practicing magic. Ancestral protections, etc., unknowable most times. Perhaps a mirror/thought form of shadow self can be manifested for the kicks. So it looks like someone's getting various different ideas for spell casting. I don't want to keep fueling those storms now that they have passed. Yeah, so that's your I think you posted about a storm weather work, and I saw some storm waters in the Witchcraft Live Facebook group, I think it was. Magical disposal does not get enough attention at all. So many cords still tethered. Imagine How many candles lit and how many conjurings have been attempted, met and unseen, yet persist in the darkness? That's somewhat poetic. Well done. Don't normally get a bit of poetry in here. Feel free to send some my way. We're still in a drought despite recent rain we've had in my area. I'm presuming they mean a bit of storm and not your remains from your rancid honey jars. I don't think Alex wants your rancid remains. Everything deserves a proper goodbye. Nice. Hold off a week or so. When Alex gets rain, we get more. And my house might slide off this hill if we get too much more soon. Coconut oil is antimicrobial and
that's what I
sweet.
responded to earlier.
I put the date on things I've made with fresh ingredients so I know when they're past their best. It's always a reasonable idea. Sounds like a herbalist. I place my jars in hot water to loosen the honey, since sweeting jars represent love, and while love is like a fire, if it's not tended, it goes out. I don't know. Some stalkers are very persistent cinders. Most coconut oil goes solid at room temperature, which isn't in keeping with a honey jar, which is about movement. Oh, now we're going into the deep symbology of the insides of the honey jars. And
at the end of the day, if you're not an actual hoodoo practitioner, however you do it is a bastardized version. So really not going to make any difference what you're using, as long as you're understanding how the ingredients are working. Just going to say.
Odd question, but I think this one might be an interesting one. Can you sweeten a spirit using a jar spell the same way you can a human? That's an interesting question. Do you want to take that, or am I taking it?
I was just going to say, if you can establish a link, that would be the trickiest part. You could use any kind of jar to do that, but I would find that an easier way, because you're dealing in spirit, the jar doesn't actually need to exist. There are all sorts of spirit jars spells that you could use anyway if you wanted to trap the spirit in order to sweeten it. But yeah, there are more energetic ways of sweetening a spirit, or simpler ways, like actually just offering the sweet things to them, if that's something they fancy.
If you want a spirit to like you, most of the time, then people tend to, particularly the pagans, tend to opt for, let's just offer something for it, give it presents, because who doesn't like presents? Some spirits don't like presents, but you know. So yeah, it's one of those things. I can't say I'd ever think to do that.
No, but it's an interesting concept.
Interesting concept. Yeah, it's an interesting concept. I mainly work in the astral realm. My question is, if the spirits visit you in the earthly realm, can they physically hurt you? I feel drained sometimes and notice scratches, which I do not do myself. I try to shield. Thank you. Yes, some spirits can hurt you in the physical realm. But remember, always remember that with the physical realm and the spirit realm, those two as above, so below. So if they do tinker with you in one of them, that will start to manifest in the other realm. And that can manifest as all sorts of things. People make the mistake, generally paranormal investigators make this kind of mistake of, they go into some place and they're dealing with the spirits and they get scratched and they think, well, something here has scratched my back. But that's not the case. What that is that's working on an energetic, basically messing about with your energetic components, probably in the astral world or potentially somewhere else, but more than likely astral realm, around that sort of place, that is then manifesting in the physical world inside your body as a problem. I think we did a little I did an occult ramblings about this, where we were talking about giving people crabs, never having slept with them. Magical crabs from a distance. But yeah, I mean, it's one of those things that unfortunately that sort of thing's not really explained, I don't think, is it? But then generally speaking, the sorts of people that tend to go into those environments and get scratched generally aren't magical practitioners that have systems in place that protect against things like that. So if you're doing a lot of astral work, then please do remember that when you wake up in your physical body and your consciousness transfers back to your physical body, your astral body is still there. It doesn't go back in it's still there. It's just your consciousness has shifted. So all of those goodies and baddies, for want of a better term, still have access to your astral body, you know. And most people, I've seen many bad things manifest in people's lives because they've been attacked on the astral plane, but they've never got to the astral plane to feel their physical body or look at it or anything like that. But the link's still there.
Yeah, I will add there before you go on to the next one, Liam.
Yeah.
So it's just, so we do a lot of getting people ready for astral work, and what we try to do is allow them to kind of establish what that feels like when they are in their physical body. So lots of people make the kind of dreamscaping attempts and kind of walk out in that way, when actually the shift of consciousness is the easier way to do it. It just takes longer for you to actually figure that how that feels. And it's that switch of being aware of your astral body even when you're not in it is really important practice, so that if you needed to, if you felt some kind of attack, then obviously you would be able to shift over to deal with it. Because like Liam said, you know, just because you're not in the vehicle doesn't mean it's not still on the drive. You know, it's there. So yeah, come on.
Provocation works in both realms as well. When you're astral, what are your intentions? So, Justin. So we haven't got that much longer left. We've only got a couple of minutes, unless you want to go into extra time. So, witchcraft diplomas, I suppose we should end on. What are your thoughts on the witchcraft diplomas you've found? Because I found that it's the sort of, I think it appeals to the sort of people that are very academically inclined, and they feel that, oh, if I want to learn something, the best way to learn it is to enroll in a course, which is not necessarily true. It also appeals to collectors, the people that want to collect those useless pieces of paper. Oh, I've got another accreditation, you know, another little certificate to add to my massive folder of useless certificates, you know. I mean, some people on these games collect like digital swords and shit and spend hours trying to get trophies and stuff in a virtual reality game. I see it no different than people that kind of want to collect some diplomas to a certain extent.
Yeah. Well, the idea is that they are doing work. The fact that they got a certificate makes them feel like they justified the time they spent. So, you know, for the simplest way to put that is what we always say, which is, if you've spent 5 hours this week reading about a new type of magic or a new type of practice or something that is gaining your practice, you should be expending at least 5 hours on the practical side. So, you know, if you spent 5 hours reading, I expect you to have spent at least 5 hours, ideally more, working on that. So that might not actually mean, by that I don't mean 5 hours casting spells. I mean 5 hours working on your own individual practice. They should match. So, and ideally you should be practicing more than you read. So this is what lots of people do, is they go and enroll themselves on a course because it has a reward system for having done the reading. So whereas actually what you need to be doing is actually spending that time. So if you've read for 5 hours about astral travel, you should be spending at least 5 hours to match that in either attempting to practice or considering what your options are, doing all that kind of work that goes with it in order to figure out how that works. And I think that's what's lacking, because most of these online courses don't have a practical element because they're not at real colleges. If you were at a college, you would be doing all that training, and then you would actually be doing some kind of assessment, an actual physical assessment of that understanding to demonstrate that understanding. Whereas on most of these, you'll take a multiple choice test where the answer is one of those four. That does not really demonstrate your understanding of this. So, yeah.
I think a lot of people tend to try to make things overly simple, and the most simplest thing that you can really put it down to is to make progress. Now, Alex has put really in one that I think is quite interesting. Is like going to the gym, it's all about consistency, and that's true to a certain point. But remember, the person that goes to the gym 5 days a week but only goes on the vending machine when they get there isn't going to make any progress. And you'll see that so much in witchcraft. People go on the vending machine. And what is the vending machine? The vending machine are books. People think that if they buy another book and read it and absorb the knowledge, that they're somehow doing something. They're not. They're memorizing garbage. Some of the garbage might make them sound clever, might make them sound like they know what they're doing, might get them invited to various groups and things like that, and people say, oh well, you're so well educated, you must be a very advanced witch. But no, it just means that they have really no different than buying a witchcraft diploma course that's got you a certificate and you can't do anything. So
it's like when you go to the doctors and you realize that the doctor you've just seen is a student doctor. It makes you question the fact that you've just spent 10 minutes explaining something to them that they've only just finished reading about. And that's what you're talking about. You're talking about actually, do you have an understanding of what that means? It's fine reading lots, but could you actually deal with that? It's all great saying, I know I could use a honey jar for this. You're kind of like, okay, but do you understand how a honey jar works? If I asked you to explain how it works, could you tell me? Could you actually break it down into how it metaphysically works?
And can you change it?
And can you change it?
So yeah, Alex, about consistency, like Alex has said, it's all about consistency, but it needs to be the right sort of consistency. It needs to be consistently pushing the limits of what you're able to do. And there's something that's come up quite a lot with various people at the moment that are going for a lot of work that we mentor. And that is that they often don't necessarily feel that they're getting very far. And the reason why they compare not getting very far at the moment to how far they've come in the past is that in the past they were doing the same stuff they can do easily, and they've gone from being able to do everything first time perfectly to now actually some things don't always work out first attempt. And the reason for that is because they're pushing themselves past what they're capable of doing, which means that they're going to make mistakes and they have to learn, because they're, like Alex talks about the gym, they're not just lifting weights that they know they can lift. They're lifting weights they don't know they can lift. And there's that uncertainty and that learning progress and that adapting. And Helen's got a proper old lady phrase, which is brilliant. Practice makes perfect. And yes, you can't really get any simpler than that. Practice, practice, practice.
Well, the only one I'm going to push beyond that is it's called witchcraft for a reason. You should be crafting. It's not which book, or which read. It is witchcraft. You are supposed to be creating, manifesting, building. That's what you're supposed to be doing. Otherwise, you're not practicing anything. You are reading about it.
Now, Chris, it wouldn't be the Fausty Witches Show if we didn't completely slate New Age practice. So, what do you think of this one?
Oh dear. I knew you were going to say something like that. Okay.
Shield
I'm
and
not a
then
fan.
cleanse. Palo Santo smoke smudge should help.
Okay. The question would be, categorically, do you understand what smudging does? So they have
It's like a fart in a lift, in it.
So what is that actually doing? Other than potentially, stinking out your space or giving yourself some kind of respiratory problems later in life by inhaling lots of smoke. So
Well, it adds to your carbon footprint. Surely
do
that's
you
a good thing.
understand what that's actually doing? And that's the important bit. So, most people use smoke because the ancients used smoke, and that's why they like using it. It's a physical representation of flooding a system, pushing something out with something that's supposed to be good. That's what you're doing, rather than cleaning something. You're flooding it with water. You're flooding it with smoke, and that's what it is. It's overwhelming something in the hope that it will take away any of the dirty stuff.
Like a fart in a lift. If you're in a horror film and there's the mad scream Axeman in a mask and you run in the lift and you do a fart, you'll notice that fart will very quickly clear the lift if there's people in it. They'll want to get out because it's not a nice environment. And the difference is you need to remember that if you're smudging and you're creating not a particularly nice environment, it doesn't technically force anything out. All it does is change the energetic makeup of that area to make it less comfortable. With weaker things, potentially, you could be removing certain energetic necessities for them to exist there. But with anything bigger, more powerful, you're really just making it like it's not a particularly nice place that it wants to be. But remember, that mad axe person can go in that lift even if you farted in it. They won't like it, but if they will go in there to stab you.
I really don't like that one, Liam, but okay, sure. It's Fausty. I'll let you have that
so we've
one.
got to say something like that. We've been too well behaved.
What I would say, well, we've had a new crowd today. It's typical the last show we'd have a new crowd. But yeah, just to go on that one, it's like going back to when we were talking about the spirit and the scratching. Just because you flooded something on the physical doesn't mean you flooded something in energetically. So the smoke is just smoke. What you are having to do is on an energetic level, you are supposed to be cleaning that space. So if you are just smoking a room full of smoke, you've got exactly what Liam's just said, which is a fart in a lift. You've just got to smoke. Unless you understand how the smoke is actually working and you're able to manipulate that on an energetic level, all you've done is made a space smell good or bad.
But
I
Chris,
hate sage. Sage
what
is the big
about
one.
one's intention?
Are you trying to get all of them in before we go? Is that what it is?
Well, yeah. I mean, I had my notebook. I was trying to get them all in before we go.
Okay.
It's all about the intention, all of that. I mean, we're over an hour. We're only supposed to be on here for an hour, but
it's fine. It's been interesting. It's been nice to actually, get lots of questions. We get lots of questions, but normally our topic is a bit more streamlined, whereas it's been a bit all over the place, which is good. I'm going to miss this.
Anyone have any final questions? Please write them down now. Whilst you're thinking of your final question or questions, then I will share a little something, right? Because this is a pet hate. And something that sums up a lot of modern magical practice here in the West. And that is that if there is your stereotypical creepy ass haunted house full of spirits and the like, some fucking idiot goes in with a sage smudge stick, smudges it, nothing happens. And then you get the local Wiccan go in, and they break down a slightly more complicated ritual. They use the 4 elements. They use a candle flame and do a candle flame banish to get the fire element and purify with fire. And then they'll get the water and earth and mix the salt and the water together to purify that element. And then they'll use some fucking smudging or something like that to purify the air. And they'll purify all the elements. And what will happen is about 5 to 10 minutes later, that spirit will come straight back again. Because they don't know what the fuck they're doing.
Do you know what's a lot more effective?
They're trying to interact with the energetics of the vicinity. But what they're not doing is they're not looking at what the actual problem is. They're thinking, there's a spirit, let's get rid of it in the only fucking way I know how. Let's do a banishing ritual or a massive cleansing ritual and get rid of all the elements. Because as we all know, in this world, there are 4 elements that everything must be consistent of. And if I replace them back to their original purity, it will get rid of any imbalances, which is technically what they teach you in Wicca 101, but is absolute shit. And it doesn't work. Hence why they can't deal with the spirits coming back. Church is also one for that. They do their, exorcism rituals. They never technically go down very well. It might quell it for a little bit, but it always comes back. Nature doth abhor a vacuum. So I don't think we've got any further questions, actually. No one's asking anything.
We've probably scared them off because we've just
maybe
told them not
you
to
could
do the basics that everyone's always told to do.
Maybe you can ask another spirit you're close with to come in and clean the house as well. Potentially, you could get help from the spirit world. Obviously, with witchcraft and that, if you go about your cleansings getting help from the spirit world to do your cleansings, the next thing you need to do is to learn how to do that yourself. So that's what we talked about, pushing practice. Because if you get 100% success rate with working with a certain spirit, cleansing houses and that, you're not really pushing your practice. You're able to do it, but take that spirit away. So you're just left with you and see if you can then do that. That's an example of a great way of trying to push things, trying to push further development. Because some people just get too comfortable. Nothing to do with diplomas, etc. But when did you two come out of the broom closet? I'm 51 years old, but still doing what most people... Oh, right, okay. I don't know. It's just one of those things over time that it's difficult to hide it. I mean, if you try to hide your practice, then if you do a really good job, no one will really find out. If you don't really put much effort into hiding your practice, then a lot of people will see it for what it is, and I'll think a little bit unusual. Do a little bit of magic, occulty stuff, magic, and that Liam, he does that sort of thing. Other people will just go straight over their heads. But then there's the kind of declaration of actually going around calling yourself a witch, which we basically only do because it's for business purposes, essentially. I struggled with the term witch personally because I thought it was when I look at a word, I look at the community that uses that word, that word's associated with. And when I looked in the 21st century at the word witch and the people that use it, I thought I don't really want to use that. But what ended up happening is whenever someone would ask me for some help and I said, well, I'll teach you a spell, they'd automatically start saying, well, he's teaching me a spell, he's a witch. So I just essentially embraced it and said, oh, fuck it. If you want to call me that, call me that. And now I think it's great for business and marketing. What about you, Chris? Is it a similar story or different?
Well, I'm not a robot, so I know a lot more people and have to frequent a lot more people. So for me,
More
it's
social.
in some ways, I'm still in the broom closet. In some ways, it's one of those things. I don't hide it, but I don't exactly advertise it either. So what Liam's talking about, but in a slightly more, you need to know what you're going to say when you're asked, and depending on what format that is. So now I'm a teacher. Before I worked for the NHS, like those are difficult places when someone asks you whose entire world is grounded in Western science. If they turn around to you and go, "Well, I've heard you into this witchcraft malarkey," and then I have to decide how I explain that away at the time. So depending on who they are will depend on how much I say. Me and Liam both kind of have a fairly good rule, which is, if you ask a question, I'll give you an answer. So it really depends on how intelligent the question is. If they're not going to ask intelligent questions, they're not going to get very far. But that's kind of the best way to kind of do it. I think part of it is I don't practice in a way that Instagram likes. So it's a lot easier to hide witchcraft when you use normal everyday items for practice. So, someone walking in and seeing candles on your dresser or on the kitchen table is not strange. Or going in the spice cupboard and finding there's some weirder spices in there that they've never heard of. Those sorts of things are standard types of practice. Having a herb garden, that sort of thing. It's, that's part of your actual practice. I don't think I am, but it's where I've got kind of burnt in the past is more not being able to control myself when someone says something about tarot cards or they've been to see the latest clairvoyant, and I can't help myself but scoff or make some kind of comment, and at that point you're caught out as if to go,
elitist. Is that what it is?
It's my elitism. Is sometimes showing when someone mentions something that you kind of like, oh fuck, and then someone goes, oh, what do you know about it then, Chris? In those situations, I normally just go, or just check out my website, and that normally shuts them off because they're kind of like, what? So yeah, because they're kind of expecting you to have some kooky story of this one time where you went to see someone in a circus or someone on Blackpool Pier. Where actually, when you kind of go, well, I have a business in my spare time, and just walk away, I find that's a far more effective use. Obviously, knowing what Helen's job is, I can kind of understand what her concerns are about being asked those sorts of questions, which is why I threw the NHS part in. It's just knowing kind of how much you're comfortable with people knowing. Like, I remember using the word spiritual. I'm not religious, but I suppose you could call me spiritual. That would kind of tick enough boxes for someone that doesn't want to know the answer, won't ask anymore, and it's just kind of knowing what words you're comfortable with people knowing. Candles are normally an easy one to hide. I'm just selective on what my candles look like. So they always look like household candles.
Well, there's just red candles in it. Don't you just use red candles for everything?
I pretty much read red candles for everything. And I don't do any love magic before anybody that doesn't know us, who hasn't watched the other 30 episodes of this. I don't use a lot of love magic at all. I do a lot of sex magic. That probably makes more sense. But the
lust magic.
It's hiding. I find it's hiding smells that are more difficult. So if you're burning incense and things like that, sometimes that's harder to. So you kind of, when someone knocks unexpectedly just to pop in and drop a birthday card or something in, and you've got incense burning. If they don't know you're into that stuff, that can be a bit of a shock. So I kind of just don't hide the mundane aspect. And then when they do ask questions, like, But anyway, what was the next thing Helen said? I haven't got as far as reading that yet.
She was making a nasty potion and had a black candle and some sigils with a jar labeled graveyard dirt. When someone walked in, basically, so she had to quickly hide it.
Okay.
Yeah, on the census, what did you put as your career on the census? Because I put professional witch.
Did you?
Yeah, damn right I did.
No, I
So
put
I'll
my
be on the
actual.
list. Okay.
I put what I'm paid for.
So, Chris, you were going to say something was more effective, Lauren says. I think maybe I cut you off or
Yeah,
needed
you cut me off when you were
elaborating.
talking about nasty spirits
Okay.
in a haunting, and I said
Uh,
actually more effective than a smudge stick would be sending in granddad or grandma to swear at them. That would be enough. Like, you know, you going in and actually commanding that space with a "get the fuck out of here" is far more effective than you getting out the sage or the Palo Santo or whatever else. Selenite wands is the other favorite one for people these days. Um,
where are people keeping baneful magic if not their house? Well, we have an official Thoth vault where the really bad stuff gets kept, which I will just breeze over that. Don't want to tell people I'm spiritual in case they think I'm a Wiccan. They'll probably more than likely think you're a New Ager.
oh,
I don't choose the term spiritual. I don't know what I'd say. If someone asked me, well, people have asked me before about what I think about psychics and that sort of thing, because it's the sort of thing that will come up in conversation with, oh, I'm going to see a psychic show at the fucking pub or whatever. And they say, what do you think about that? Do you believe in all that? And I'd say, well, I find that most psychics are crap, but in terms of do I believe in all of that, then I say I teach witchcraft for a living, so I kind of do,
have to.
and then that might spark conversations or might just scare people off completely. You almost need a secret room in the house to truly hide your practice. I have heard of some magicians and witches that have whole separate rooms in their house dedicated to their work. That's true. There's been many uncovered old houses around the UK. There is a famous case which I don't know about, but I'll try and get Lady Poison to talk about it at some point. Because it was a house that had a secret room that was devoted to magical practice and witchcraft and the like. And then the National Trust, basically, who now own the house, found the room and decided to literally wipe it from the history books because it goes against their whatever their fucking policy is nowadays on what they try and promote or try to shy away from. I don't fucking know. Politics, basically. And it's been pretty much, you go to the house you can pay to tour it and it's washed from the history, which is a bit of a shame. So yes, hoodoo rooms and all that from the Skeleton Key kind of film idea, witches rooms, that sort of thing are an interesting idea. Traditional witchcraft wise, you'd probably be just doing it in the kitchen table. If you go to the Witchcraft Museum, there's a nice little kind of display of what a cunning man, wise woman, what kind of type setup would be. And it's just like a little cottage farmhouse type thing because people would do that. Or many people I know do go to specific working sites. So not necessarily Neolithic sites like Stonehenge. They might go to their local woodland or something to do work. I think it will depend on what stains. Because if you do work that does stain, then yes, you can get rid of it. But if you're doing that work on a regular basis, is there any point? If I want to do something that is kind of icky, then I'm going to clean out an old jar and I'm going to do it in an old jar as opposed to one of my nice glasses in the kitchen cupboard, because this is disposable. I could just get rid of it. If it was a glass, I could get rid of it, but I more than likely want to clean it out. So some people will go so far as to keep their practice very sanitized and to make sure everything's scrubbed clean. Some people will just kind of walk away. Other people will just say, well, okay, I'm doing a little bit of baneful magic here in this specific place. I'm probably going to do baneful magic again at a future point. I might as well just confine that sort of work to this one place and not really bother too much about it. You can find many places stained with energy, and how hard do you want to scrub those pans? Is it worth it?
At the end of the day, it's one of those utensils. Always be careful, because it's a case of, you're not going to want to drink from something that you regularly crush poisonous things into, because however well you clean it, there's nothing stopping, nothing is ever truly clean, which is what Liam's talking about with staining. But it really depends on the sort of practice you do. If all your practice is held within this reality, within this space, physically, then that's going to be more likely to stain a space like this. If you do all your work on an energetic level, on levels that people aren't even familiar with, the only people that would be aware that that's there is people like ourselves who are working at that level. So,
yeah,
yes, you may be staining this space, but not necessarily on a level anybody can feel or see. Again, as above, so below. Eventually, it will wear through, but is it going to be in this lifetime? By the time it's actually filtered through into the space,
when you paint over the nicotine staining,
exactly.
It's just got to last long enough to sell the house, hasn't it?
Yeah. So you're kind of like, really? Is anyone going to know?
That being said, how many times have we found when we've done consultations with professional psychics and magical practitioners that work from home, that problems can then arise from not having a routine? Because dust accumulates, so you clean it. But a lot of the time, people that work from home doing reading after reading after reading, or spell after spell after spell, if you're doing enough in terms of volume, but even if it's a low level energy work, it will still potentially have an effect, and that can cause problems for some people. Naturally,
that's a shoddy cleaning routine, though, isn't it?
Yeah.
That's someone not understanding that I'm doing magical work here, or I'm doing psychic work here, and I do energy work, and therefore it's going to leave a smell, like, or a stain. Like, somebody that actually appreciates how the thing that they're doing works should be considering the fact that actually I don't shit where I eat for a reason. The toilet is the toilet, the kitchen is the kitchen. You don't ever have the two in the same place if you want to live long enough, without some kind of nasty infections. But so it's that common sense says, if you have a desk in your bedroom and you work at it because you're on furlough for the last 12 months, you're going to have actually start to go, I associate this room as the place I work instead of the place that you sleep. Like, what baffles me is how many people we come across that actually don't think that way, why we come across so many problems, particularly with psychics. I don't feel like we've slagged them off enough today, particularly with psychics who don't think about cleansing, or they think putting a crystal in moon water once a month is going to cleanse the fact that they're working on people all day, every day, 30 consultations a day, working with all sorts of the great unwashed, and not thinking, oh, okay, well, I wash my hands between each person. What about the other bodies?
You make all this sound so spooky, Liam, but when you actually understand what it is, it's not that scary. You're right, it's not that scary. The problem is a lot of people don't understand what it is, so it's all scary to them because the unknown is often scary to people. So that's pretty much the end of the show. We've gone about half an hour over, but that doesn't matter. Obviously, this is the last Fausty Witches Show. If you want to talk with us and look at other content we've produced and talk with other witches that are on a magical path, go and join the Witchcraft Live Facebook group. It's highly worthwhile. Okay, Witchcraft Live Facebook group. If you want to listen to the most amazing witchcraft podcast that is on the internet, that is not made by Wiccans and doesn't discuss Wicca or any of that sort of shit in anything other than a derogatory way, you need to listen to the No Holds Barred Witchcraft podcast. And if you want to buy some stuff and you want the money to go from us, the only way to do that is to go and buy it from the thothwitchcraft.com witchcraft shop. And we're even on fucking YouTube. Go on Thoth TV and look up our YouTube channel because you can get all of the past half-hour episodes of the No Holds Barred Witchcraft podcast. And if you're on a magical path, maybe best interact with other people that are actually practicing magic, like the people in the Witchcraft Live Facebook group. Don't just go and buy another book. Go and have a magical conversation with people. Go and see what other people are up to and go and start experimenting yourself. So that is it for the last episode.
Do you know what you didn't mention, Liam?
Witches. What did I not mention? That we're launching a diploma?
We didn't mention that, which I wasn't thinking. But
No.
also, I was more thinking actually, you know, where we do most of our teaching, we keep talking about mentors and mentees on here. And we haven't mentioned the Patreon, which is where...
We haven't mentioned the Patreon, but a lot of people will find that from listening to the No Holds Barred Witchcraft podcast. Because this is one thing. If you're new to listening to us and you like us, don't give us any money yet. Don't ask us for help yet. Don't ask us to mentor you yet. Go and listen to the podcast, right? Go and have a little look on the YouTube channel. Yeah. Ask a couple of people what they think in the Witchcraft Live group. And then maybe go on the Thoth Patreon. But there's links to all of that in all of those other places. So at the end of the day, you do you.
Adele's just mentioned that we don't currently ship to the US.
We don't currently ship to the US. We used to ship to the US, but we don't.
How that works at the moment.
We're trying to.
Too much red tape.
There's a lot of red tape, and we're having a lot of problems with customs at the moment. So unfortunately, no, we don't currently ship to the US, but we may switch that feature back on at some point. We're trying to work on doing other stuff at the moment. That's really, at the end of the day, is worthwhile because we try to focus primarily on education. I mean, you can buy lovely things like this from us. You'd be better off making it yourself, let's be fair. So if you really want to learn witchcraft, then don't worry about buying stuff from our shop, you know, because although you will learn and get some quite cool stuff, it's more important that you push your magical practice further. Because if you push your magical practice further, that means that you will be able to, if you live in the US, make a lot of money from your money magic, because it'll be so much better than it is currently. Buy a first-class ticket and come over to the UK and speak to us personally. You know? So there we go. Anything else to add, Chris, before I play the titles out?
For the last time.
For the last time.
For the
Goodbye.
last time.
For the last time.